Hi, welcome to the Delaware Valley Workshop. Did you know the average woodworker has enough scrap wood lying around to build a small piece of furniture? It's true. These offcuts that we all save add up fast. But here's the kicker. Most of us never use them. In this video, we're going to change that. We're taking those premium wood leftovers and turning them into a Keurig coffee station that'll make your kitchen the envy of the neighborhood. No fancy hand tools are needed, just your trusty power tools and a bit of creativity. So, are you ready to turn your wood pile into wood style? Take a look around your own shop. I bet you've got a corner or a scrap bin that looks a lot like mine, piled high with the odd-shaped pieces of wood, offcuts from past projects, and boards that were just too good to throw away. We hate to see good material go to waste, so we hang on to these scraps, telling ourselves we'll use them someday. But let's be honest, that someday rarely comes. Instead, the pile just keeps growing, taking up valuable space and collecting dust. Okay, I'm back at the assembly table after rating my scrap bins to show you some of the wood I have chosen. I have a thick chunk of sassafras, 2 thick pieces of walnut, a piece of what I think is white oak, some poplar, a piece of oak, some hard maple, and some curling maple. Unfortunately, this odd walnut cutoff is still not getting used. If you have an idea for what I could use this for, please drop me a comment below. I really need some ideas for this walnut, as I've been wanting to use it in a project for some time. Now that I've made my selections, I need to mill them all down, so they go from this in the rough to this for the top of our coffee station. It's time to take our chosen pieces and begin the milling process. There's something truly satisfying about taking a rough piece of wood and transforming it into a smooth, perfectly squared board. Why is milling so important? Well, imagine trying to build a house on a crooked foundation. It just wouldn't work, right? The same goes for woodworking. If all our boards aren't flat, square, and parallel, we'll run into all sorts of problems down the line. Joints won't fit properly, drawers won't slide smoothly, and the whole project could end up looking like it was built during an earthquake. To start, we're going to rough cut strips at the table saw from our materials. Then we'll take those strips to the miter saw and cut them to rough length. Third, we'll head to the joiner to flatten one face of our boards. This gives us a nice smooth reference surface to work from, and then we'll square up the adjoining edge. This edge will be at a perfect 90-degree angle to our flattened face. The last step will be at the planer, so stay tuned for that step. As we work through our pile of offcuts, you can see the transformation happening right before your eyes. What started as a jumble of rough, mismatched pieces is turning into a set of smooth, square pieces ready for our project. Okay, it's time for some assembly of our top shelf. We're going to take all the strips that we milled and glue them all together to make a rough-sized top for the coffee station. I know. As you watch me gluing up the strips, you're saying, wait, I thought he was making a coffee station. Has he literally tricked me to watching a video that makes a basic cutting board? That's not what I signed up for. Believe me, I feel ya. But my wife's kitchen is full of cutting boards and she wanted the top to match. As an alternative, you could make a butcher block top for the station or even create a top shelf just from one species of wood. But my wife wants what she wants, and anybody who's married and would like to stay that way listens more than he talks. Besides, it's her kitchen. I wouldn't want her to come into my shop and paint the walls sunflower yellow, would I? I know you're shaking your head up and down in agreement. Once it was all clamped up, I set it aside to dry, and that's where I called it a day. The next morning I came back to the shop with no coffee and looking forward to my new coffee station. So a non-caffeinated Grumpy Joe began to remove all the clamps. The next thing I did was something no one ever shows, putting the clamps back, and that did not enhance my mood. Okay, now that it's out of the clamps, I have to deal with all the glue drips. I've seen a lot of people take this just like it is and throw it through the planer. I don't know how good that is on the knives, so I'm going to take a few minutes with a regular household scraper and just scrape off the bumps of it on both sides so that when I run it through the planer, at least it won't galvanize as quickly as it might have if I just threw it through the planer. Also, I think I have to trim about 1/4 inch off each side because my planer only does 13 inches and I think this is 13.5. So I'm going to do that now and then set up the planer and run it through. Turns out the top was exactly 13 inches wide, which will fit my planer, so no resizing was necessary. After the scraping was done, we can begin the last step of the milling, planing the top. I do the planing as one big glue up instead of individually because no matter how well I glue and clamp the strips, I will get some unevenness from strip to strip. So instead of planing once before gluing up and then once after, I do all the planing after the glue up. I keep running the piece through the planer on both sides until the top is nice and smooth. Look how nice the top looks after a few passes. You can really see the different species pop out. Now that our top is fresh off the planer and looking great, it's still just a flat rectangle. Let's start with the sharp corners and round them off. I like to use a circle template for this. After I mark the corners, we can shape them with the oscillating spindle sander. Next up, we're going to ease the edges of the top. This is where our trim router comes in handy. We'll use the roundover bit to create a smooth rounded edge all around the top. Now for the fun part. Creating stop dados on the underside of our top. We'll use these to join the sides to the top of our coffee station. A dado jig is super helpful for this. It clamps onto our workpiece and guides the router, ensuring straight and consistent cuts. I have set up marks on the jig to show me where to stop at each end of our cut to make sure we don't go too far. Now we can move on to cutting the sides of our coffee station. When cutting smaller pieces like the sides, a push stick on the table saw can be helpful. It provides better control and accuracy than freehand cutting. After running the wood through the table saw, we can move to the miter saw to cut the sides to length. By using a stop block, we can cut both sides to the exact same length. Okay, so I'm breaking into my voiceover to do a live demonstration because this would be hard to do with a voiceover. So I have my stop dados milled into the bottom of my shelf, and now I'm going to put on the sides. So what I do is I slide my side pieces into the stop dado. Try to do this. Okay, and as you can see, I still have a little bit of my dado showing here and about 1 inch of side sticking past the shelf, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I measure the distance from the edge of the board to what's left over, and then I take my pencil and I scribe a line like that to get the depth of the dado, and then I take the distance from the back, put a line there, and using my bandsaw I'm going to cut this out, which should enable the whole thing to slide over like that and be flush with the back.
That doesn't sound too hard.
At the bandsaw, this is literally a 10-second cut, and there's really not much to say about it, so I'm just going to let the video do the talking. Back at the top, and we're testing the fit. Everything seems to be sliding in and lining up perfectly. I need a dado on the inside of each side where the back of the station is slipped into. I'll cut those dados on the table saw with my stack dado set and my panel sled. The dado stack is thinner than the dado I need, so I have to make a couple of passes to complete the dado. I'll make the back of the station on the table saw, cutting the board to the width that I need. So once again, I'm going to break out of the voiceover and show you what I'm doing. So I need to measure my back piece that goes, in the dados and slides in the back. But on my plans, it says one measurement, and that's going good, but you never really cut to your plans once you start real world building. So what I'm going to do is something called relative or in-place dimensioning, where I'm going to actually measure the distance from the bottom of this groove to the bottom of this groove, or dado, and it says 18 5/8. So I'm going to take my back piece right here, which is longer. I'm going to mark it a smidgen bigger than 18 5/8 and just chop a little bit off the time until I have a really snug fit. It's very fussy work, but it's well worth it because then you don't have any groove or wiggle in the sides, and it fits snugly and holds everything square. So I've got my measurement. I'm going to go to the miter saw, cut it, test fit it, cut it, test fit it until I'm happy with it. Basically, it's very small cuts. What I typically do is bury the teeth of the miter saw blade in the curve cut of the saw, then bring the board up against the face of the blade. Lift the blade and then cut the board so I'm only cutting off the distance from the inside of the blade to the outside of the tooth. Basically, this is an apply, rinse, and repeat operation until the board fits snugly. When I designed this piece in SketchUp, it was very boxy with a lot of sharp corners. I was unhappy with that look, so I decided to soften the look of the piece with some curves. So using my trim router and a small rounding over bit, I rounded over the front outside edge of each side. Let's start with attaching the sides to the top. We've got our stop dados ready, but we're not going to glue the entire length. Instead, we're only gluing the front 4 inches of the dado. This might seem odd, but there's a good reason for it. Wood naturally expands and contracts with changes in humidity, and by leaving most of the dado unglued, we're giving the top room to move towards the back of the piece. This simple trick can prevent warping and cracking down the line. Now for the back piece, we're taking a different approach. We're going to glue it to the dados on the sides, but we're not gluing it to the top. Again, this allows for wood movement. The top can expand and contract freely while the rest of the structure remains solid. It's like giving your wood a little breathing room. When we're ready to glue, we need to work fast. Wood glue starts to set up pretty quickly, so we want to have everything ready to go. I like to do a dry run first, making sure all my clamps are adjusted and within reach. This way, when the glue is on, we can move quickly and efficiently. As we dive into drawer construction, you might think we're just slapping together some boxes. But tell me, have you ever heard of box joints? Well, get ready to see them in a whole new light. Box joints are a classic woodworking method for connecting pieces of wood. They're strong, they look great, and they add a touch of craftsmanship to any project. But here's the real beauty. They're perfect for using up those smaller offcuts we've been saving. To create our box joints, we're using the Jonathan Katz Moses box joint jig. This tool is a game changer for making consistent, precise joints. It runs in your table saw miter slots and lets you cut perfectly spaced fingers that interlock like puzzle pieces. It's actually pretty neat to watch in action. Now for the sides of our drawers, we're using poplar. Poplar is known as a secondary wood in woodworking, but don't let that fool you. Poplar is strong and easy to work with. Plus, it's usually cheaper than hardwoods, making it a smart choice for drawer construction. As we start cutting our box joints, remember to take it slow. Each cut needs to be precise for the joints to fit together properly. It's tempting to rush, but trust me, a little patience here pays off big time in the end. Once we've cut all our joints, we'll put them aside for the time being. We will be assembling them soon, and that's where the magic happens. Watching those fingers interlock perfectly is pretty satisfying. For the drawer bottoms, we're going with MDF, medium density fiberboard. I know some woodworkers turn their noses up at MDF, but hear me out. It's stable, it doesn't warp easily, and is plenty strong for drawer bottoms. Plus, it's a great way to use up the MDF scraps you might have laying around. We'll use the table saw and the miter saw to size the MDF for the drawer boxes. Okay, let's talk about gluing up our box jointed drawers. This is where the magic happens, folks. Before we start, we need to get everything ready. I've got my wood glue, clamps, and a mallet all within reach. Trust me, once we start gluing, we don't want to be running around looking for stuff. Now here's something a lot of people don't realize. When it comes to box joints, more glue is better. I know it sounds messy, but hear me out. We want to get glue on every surface of those box joints. Why? Because it makes the joint way stronger. Think about it. More glue means more surface area for the pieces to bond. Let's start by applying glue to all the fingers of one side of our drawer. Don't be stingy, really get in there. Now when we put the pieces together, you'll see some glue squeezing out. That's good. It means we've got full coverage. I like to use a small brush to make sure the glue gets in all of the nooks and crannies. Insert the drawer bottom before you glue the last piece. Okay, now that we've got all our pieces together and there's glue everywhere, now is the time to clamp it up. Good clamping is crucial for strong joints. It ensures all the pieces are tied together while the glue dries. It's time to sand the drawer boxes. You might notice my new sander. I need to learn how aggressive it is. As you will see in a minute, it's not like a big box store sander. The only thing purchased in this project were the drawer slides totaling in $18 from Amazon. Everything else came from our leftovers, as it were. Let's get started with the installation. The key to smooth sliding drawers is all in the positioning. We need to make sure our slides are perfectly level and parallel. This is where the setup blocks come in handy. These little blocks are like training wheels for the drawer slide installation. They help us position the slides at exactly the right height and depth every time. For the mating slide, please don't snicker at the over sanding you see. I warned you it was coming. That sander was really aggressive. I centered the mating slide to correspond with the center of the master slide. All the slides were attached with the provided screws. And as always, I can't resist just playing with the drawer slides. In and out, in and out. One of my favorite things to do when I build something. Now we're back at the table saw, ready to cut our drawer fronts. I'm going to take the piece of tiger maple that I've selected for the drawer fronts and run it through the table saw. And then I'll take the next piece and run it through again, and those will be the two fronts for the drawers. After I ran the drawer fronts through the table saw, I took my trim router and routed in the drawer profile that I had chosen for the front. Well, it seems I've lost the footage on how I set the distance for the drawers, so I'm going to try to recreate it here after it was built. Put the bottom shim in first, then I took the drawer front and attached some double-sided tape, and then I pushed it against the drawer box. Then took my second shim and placed it on top of the bottom of that drawer, and then took double-sided tape and attached it to the second drawer face and pushed it against that drawer box. With both drawer fronts attached to the boxes, I pulled them out and used 2 screws in each box to attach the base to the box permanently. After that was all done, I finished it with a couple coats of polyurethane, and here's how it looked when it was done.